Warning: this video contains descriptions of a graphic nature. Viewer discretion is advised. That's not a joke. It's kind of good that the Faces of Fear got votes, so many votes, because it's like taking off a band-aid real fast or jumping into a cold pool. You want to kind of get it over with. And that's because the Faces of Fear are kind of gross, and I had worried ever since I started the D&D channel about when I would do these guys and how they would come across because of it. But we'll get to that in a moment. We're going to start with this image. Our story starts in 20XDX, and at OYT, which is a 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons message board, we had prestige class contests. And prestige classes are classes that you basically had to qualify to take. You would take several levels of fighter, and then you would transfer into a prestige class. They were more prestigious because you had to qualify for them. And we would have contests to sort of push the boundaries of prestige classes. And we would usually have a mechanical theme or a flavor theme. Mechanical theme would mean you would have to have some sort of game rule restriction on your prestige class. Like most prestige classes are 5 levels or 10 levels. So we had one where you couldn't your prestige class had to have something other than 5 or 10 levels. And 3 was also actually kind of common. So we wanted a weird number of levels, and we wanted it to make sense, not just to have a weird number of levels for the sake of it. Then there was the flavor theme, and that was the Halloween contest. And as we saw in the vote video, the Faces of Fear was a prestige class that I created for the Halloween contest. But the actual origin of the Faces of Fear comes before that, in a contest for monster prestige classes. See, 3rd edition changed it so that monsters and PCs used the same rules. And that meant you could give monsters class levels. You could take a troll and make it into a troll fighter or a troll barbarian. And that also meant that you could give a monster prestige class levels if they qualified for them. But up until this contest, I don't think anybody had specifically thought, hey, that meant that we could make prestige classes specifically for monsters to take. And after this contest, I did see a few, but before I don't remember any. Well, the monster that I wanted to make a prestige class for, I thought briefly about doing the Carrion Crawler, which is my absolute favorite D&D monster, but that didn't go so far. So then I decided to do one of my favorite 3rd edition D&D monsters, the Krenshar. Now, you might remember in an earlier video I talked about the Krenshar. It's like a cross between a hyena and like a mountain lion or a cougar. And their claim to fame, their special ability is that they can peel the skin off of their faces up over their face to show the bone and muscle beneath, and then they let out a high-pitched shriek, and this causes a fear effect in the people who see it. A lot of people made fun of the Krenshar. They thought it was a silly and stupid monster, and I didn't. I love the Krenshar. So in this prestige class contest, I wanted to make a class that would turn the Krenshar into a powerful and deadly and scary monster to face. And obviously I wanted to make it so that their one ability, their peeling back and screaming at you, got better and bigger and stronger and more special. To the point where at the end of the class, they could do that ability and just outright kill you. And that would definitely get them a little bit of attention. Let's go ahead with the Krenshar face here. And I didn't finish the prestige class in time. I was working on it and working on it, and when the contest finally, the due date came around, I wasn't even close to done. I was only halfway through with the class. So that idea got shelved until the Halloween class. Now, I already mentioned that the inspiration for the Halloween, as far as the flavor went, were these masks. The ones, ever since I was a kid, seeing these masks where when they're far enough away, these eyes are just dark gaping holes. So you have this eyeless void where eyes should be. And then when people would come closer, because always with these rubber masks, it's usually kids or they're always bigger than the person's head. But when it's a child wearing it, it's even comically huge. But you get close enough, a little bit of light comes through these eye holes, and you can see their face and their eyes and stuff separated from where the mask is. And as a child, that always just kind of creeped me out. It wasn't scary to the, like where I was having nightmares about it, but it was like, that's just dissonant. It didn't fit. It wasn't right. And I remembered that. So that was where I was pulling my flavor from, as well as this is Edgar from the Men in Black movie, and we'll come back to him in a moment. You cannot find a big picture of this. I wish you could, but you can't. So the Faces of Fear. Now here's where the graphic descriptions come in. So this can get kind of gross. The idea was there were going to be this group of assassins, and they were dedicated to fair. And that's not fear, it's fair. Phaer. Because poor literacy is cool. And he was basically a god of mutilation and murder that I made up just for this prestige class contest. Part of the class contest, in addition to actually designing the abilities for the class, you had to have a little bit of flavor text at the introduction. We very closely hewed to how prestige classes were supposed to be. They were supposed to be full of flavor, a way to introduce more character and flavor and what's called fluff into a game world, rather than just introducing new mechanical abilities. So you wanted to write a little, a paragraph or two or even more of sort of flavor to lead into it. So this was the what came across with the Faces of Fair. They were a group of assassins, and to kind of mutilate themselves, what they would do is they would go in through their mouth with a razor blade and cut into their cheek, the back, the inside of their cheek. And then when the razor blade finally poked out the other side a little bit, just when they had poked through the skin, they'd pull it back and then slide it down and work their way under the skin. And they wanted to do it from the inside out because they were trying to put as few holes in their face as possible. Of course, they ended up getting a bunch of holes in their face as they went along with this. And just pretend like all of these little lines on this guy, just like, little razor blade cuts all across the face where the blade had accidentally slipped through. And they would separate little bit by little bit their skin from the underlying bone and muscles in their face. And what they would do then is they would grab the hair at the top of their head, the kind of like that point where the top and the back come together, and then they would just yank it back, and that's where this comes in, kind of like this. And as their skin of their face would stretch, all the little razor blade cuts that had ended up going into their face would open up, and then they would pull back so hard that they would start to tear the skin and everything, and they would bleed. So now you have this guy who's stretching his face back, and all of these cuts are opening up all over his face, and his skin is ripping, and blood is just kind of gushing out all across him. And then he screams this high-pitched, creepy scream. And that caused a fear effect, and that would freak people out. And that's how it started. That's the basic ability of the class. As it went on, their ability to scare people would get better and better, and they'd do more and more damage to their face as they did it. And here's another one where the blood's coming out. And it would happen that their ultimate ability was the same as the Crunchar. They could actually kill people by doing this. Actually, what they would do, let's go to this picture. The very final ability, they had completely removed the skin, the connection between the skin and the face, across the entire head. The back of their head, their face, down, and to the point where now the first part where the skin is connected to the underlying tissue is at their neck. So their skin would become literally just like this bag over their head. And they would grab like in their mouth. And then I wish I had grabbed another picture of him, because you have that one picture where the two like mandible-ish looking things of the bug are coming out of the mouth. But they could actually pull open their mouth and pull it over their head like a hood. And then their whole face and their skin and their scalp and everything would just drape around their neck, and you would be left with this kind of image. But because of all the damage that had been done, they would be bleeding too. and then they would scream and everything, and that would it was magically enhanced by now to the point where when you saw this, your heart would stop. You would have a heart attack and you would die. But that wasn't their only ability, and this is where we get into the even creepier, grosser stuff. Let's do. I like this one. This one's just creepy and ugly. So they would constantly be cutting at themselves with these razor blades, and that would cause their blood to become septic. They would have so much bacteria, and then like they'd use rusty razor blades and other stuff, and so they would have these poisons that would just get into their blood. And their blood would literally it would become septic, and it would literally be poisonous. But they were protected because of their dedication to Fair. He would protect them from the effects of their poisonous blood. But now, when they could pull back on their head a little, just one quick jerk, and that would open up all these cuts, and the blood would start to accumulate, but it would pool under their skin, and so their face would look like it would had been, like someone with a black eye or someone who'd been in a fight. They'd have that purplish bruised discoloration all over them. Then they would yank again on their face, and that blood would come squirting out of the holes at you. So they would, up to a distance of like 5 or 10 feet away, they would yank on their face, and this blood would come gushing out into this poisonous cloud and get on you and get in your eyes and get in your mouth and your nose. And essentially, at this time, I was reading about botulism and tetanus. So I decided those would be good poisons. They both cause a paralysis of muscles, and this poisonous cloud would cause you to become paralyzed if you had succumbed to it completely. Now, their second ability in the blood vein was that they could actually then, if you became paralyzed or just had your muscles paralyzed to the point where you couldn't effectively fight back, they could then knock you down and hold you on the ground, force your mouth open, and then bleed right into your mouth, and then cause total paralysis. And that was gross enough. People were giving me props in the thread for that. Their final ability, I don't think it was the very last ability they got, but it might have been. It was one of the top two abilities. The top two abilities were the automatic death scream and then this ability. They could eat you as you were dying. Not when you were dead, but as you were dying. Like right after you had had a heart attack and you weren't quite dead, they would then start to just rip into you like a zombie and rip off pieces of you and start wolfing it down. And that caused a death knell effect. Death knell was a spell in 3rd edition. If a creature was dying and you cast death knell on them, they would immediately die, just like if this guy started ripping chunks out of you. And then whoever cast the death knell became stronger. They got temporary hit points and attack and damage bonuses, and so that would also happen for the Faces of Fear. So what would happen is this guy would come at you, pull back on his face, this cloud of nasty would come at you and slow down your reaction time. Then he'd either just outright give you a heart attack or pin you down and he would vomit blood into your mouth and force it down your throat to get you totally paralyzed. Then he would eat you to death. So these were not nice people. These were very gross and disgusting things. I won an award, I believe, in the Halloween contest for best flavor. Not that my flavor was the best. I shouldn't say best flavor. Best matching of flavor and mechanics. What I was going for in the flavor and how I accomplished it through the mechanics meshed very well. But that was the origin. That was how the Faces of Fear became a class. Now, I'll leave you with one last thought here in my last minute. And that is, back in the day, in the early parts of 3rd edition, every class had an iconic character. So that you had Tordek the Fighter, Lita the Rogue, Miali the Wizard. And so in our Prestige class contests, or at least for myself, I would create an iconic character for my Prestige classes. And for the Faces of Fear, that was Saren Colmer. She was the prototypical Face of Fear. And she's the leader of what became later the Faces of Fear, Fear. And we'll go into her a little bit more in another video. So that is the origin of the Faces of Fear. And I hope nobody, got too violently ill from this video. I haven't even begun to describe grossness with these people. So until next time, bye bye.